if you got the ice for the Boilermaker, that'll be good. Hey, guys.
Perfect timing.
Perfect
Hello.
timing. That's what
here.
Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit is all about. Timing, not. Anyway, welcome all. My name's Crafty, or Craig from Craftworks Distillery.
Oh, that's not ice. I don't know what that is.
Oh, that looks like it's got real ice burn. Freezer burn.
I don't know what it is.
Destroy it. Anyway,
I don't have ice.
we are live. Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit. This is episode number
56.
56. And we've got Tim and Rob from Waubs Harbour down in Tasmania. So we've crossed over the water to the other side, to this little wee island that, I think they're doing okay on the whiskey front. So, we thought we'd hear from Tim and Rob. So, hey, guys, how are you?
G'day, Crafty. G'day, Luke, Todd. Awesome to be here.
Excellent.
Thanks for having
Awesome.
us. Awesome to
We'll
shoot the
see
shit.
if you still think that way at the end of this, but anyway.
And as Tim said, the Todd is here, and so's Luke, my friend. And it's a Thursday night, and we're rearing to go. And I'm sitting here with a Boilermaker. So I'm sitting here with put it in the front of the camera, Coastal Stone, making a nice little Boilermaker, something a bit refreshing for the night.
Yum. And I'm still on yours.
Yeah, Craftworks Boilermaker, exactly. All right, Tim and Rob, what are you drinking?
I've got a little Scottish number actually tonight. It's a distillery not super well known these days because they've only semi new on the scene. Rassay Distillery, which is sitting off a coast near the Isle of Skye.
Really bottle.
Yeah, it's
That's
a really
cool
cool
bottle,
bottle.
doesn't it?
Oh, really tactile.
Yeah.
Customized bottle and a nice new coastal distillery out of Scotland who have been around, I don't know how many, I want to say only 5 or 7 years. So, something similar to what we've been around. And these guys are kicking goals. They're, smallish in the scheme of distilleries, really, for Scotland. But I really like what I'm seeing, been following them online. And so it's good to have that class.
Whereabouts are they? I know the name, but I don't know anything about them. They're on the west coast.
Yeah, so up next to Skye. It's a short ferry ride. It's only about it's an island itself. I think it's the island of Rassay.
Yeah, right, cool. All right, well, we'll see what you think of that. And Todd, what are you drinking, mate?
Okay, since tomorrow is World Gin Day, I'm
good about that.
hitting on the gin, and I'm going to go with Ballerine, the Old Dodger.
Oh, very nice.
Gin?
Yes, we were in Ballerine in January, weren't we? No.
We were. That's where I got it from. And I'm mixing it with this tonic from Long Range.
Nice.
You can find this, guys. It's well worth a try.
Oh, yeah. We were just saying off air earlier that the dark soda with any whiskey is good.
It is great. If you want to mix your whiskies with something, try the Long Range dark soda.
Yeah.
And they're not even a sponsor. And
No, we have to talk to them about that.
we should do that.
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, Long Rays, if you're listening.
Please.
And Todd and I had a fantastic experience in the weekend. We were at Mudgee Q, which is a big barbecue festival, and we were pouring the Craftworks whiskies with the Long Rays dark soda, and we turned a lot of heads with that. People were stepping away from
a lot of people away from Coke and on to dark soda.
Yeah, highly recommend it. Right, that's enough. I think we definitely should get them on as a sponsor.
I think so.
All right, let's get back to the main reason we're here, besides drinking whiskey and shooting the shit. So, Tim and Rob, for those that don't know anything about Waubs Harbour, because you guys have just broken onto the scene, and it's like a lot of people know you, but a lot of people don't know you. So, tell us where it all started and where you're at right now.
A lot of people don't know us. We've been around for 5 years doing what we're doing, but I guess Rob's especially, his start has been around a little longer than that. You can chip in, Rob, here.
I started down in with Overing back in the day, and working with Casey Casey Overeem, that is, underneath his house, basically in the shed in the early days of the Overeem brand. And then at a point in time, I started working with Lark as well, because at some point there was an ownership of the two, where Lark owned Overeem as well. So I started doing head of production at Lark, and then so moved out into contract distilling and working on this project. So it was a bit of a long road just in itself there. Like prior to that, I was doing a couple of science degrees. So I sort of had this like something that was going on personally, for me at least, that was sort of leading me up until this point at which Tim and I sort of came together at the right time, where we could actually pull something off. We've been talking about it for quite a while.
Yeah.
It's sort of like,
So, I mean, when we got 5 years ago, Rob was at Lark there, and he sort of, was keen to push the boundaries a little more. And we were in a position where, my wife and I, Beck, who is one of the founders of the business, Waubs Harbour, we were in a position where we just loved whiskey, and we loved chatting to Rob all about it. And we were keen to explore the idea of teaming together, because we knew Rob was a talented distiller, and our background was more in marketing and with a love of whiskey as well. And so
we've got a ding going on there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Where's the ding coming from?
I think it might be on my computer. I'm just going to try to get rid of that.
Is that orders coming in, is it?
Yeah, it must be, yeah. orders from your wife, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Of course, the audience says it's me that I've fucked up again.
Right.
Thank you, Kent.
Carry on.
So back to the story. Rob was creating great Tassie whiskey, right? Like Overeem, Lark, some of our favourites, especially that classic Overeem port cask I remember from back in the day. A lot of people have got this affinity with that.
Yeah.
But what we didn't have, in Tasmania, was something that, we didn't believe we had a really a maturation where it was, something similar to that coastal beautiful maturation that you get out of, those classic coastal distilleries in Scotland. And we just loved the idea, given that Tasmania is surrounded by the pretty wild ocean, to put ourselves in a position where we were creating great Tasmanian whiskey, but right by the ocean. And so we sort of had this early vision to create, a maritime, a real classic maritime. It's fairly traditional, but classic maritime Tasmanian whiskey. And so that's where it started. It sort of was a few whiskeys deep around a fire one night, and we decided, let's explore this. And many whiskeys later, here we are, 5 years later, sitting literally meters from the ocean, water lapping up on the side of the building, with something like 800 casks under maturation in a very, very saline environment.
A thing I find really cool about where you are, your location, is you can say you're a coastal whiskey and you might have been 10 kilometers inland or something. You guys are fucking on the water.
Yeah.
You are seriously right on the water.
I love that part where there's that marketing crossover where there's a lot of marketing bullshit, and you kind of, you've got to, some brands you have to sort of tease it apart. Like this, it's not a lie. It's real. It's like something you can back because it's literally there. And if it's not maritime in the product, then what else is it? Because it's right next to the ocean. So it's pretty cool. I think that proximity is pretty next level.
So how did you come across that location? I'm
so
trying to strip your homepage video and put it up for everyone to watch while we're chatting.
And a question I've got to ask: how did the negotiations go with the Penguins? They must have been pissed because that's prime real estate.
It's pity you can't hear them, but we can hear penguins outside right now. And
oh, really?
They're burrowing kind of under the building. They have for decades, and it's one of the cool things about this time of year. They're everywhere out there, which is cool. But that's just part of life, living, on the rocks here in Bicheno, Tasmania. But negotiating the building, yes. So when we started out, we had this vision. We knew that we wanted something really close to the ocean, and it had to be that wild sort of ocean. And here in Bicheno, which is about kind of in the middle of Tassie on the east coast, about 2 hours north of Hobart, 2 hours south of Launceston, but right out on the east. We had a bit of a love for Bicheno and visited here many, many times. We actually had a place here. We used to come, sort of a shack. And so, we stumbled across this old oyster hatchery, and it was shut down. It had been going for about 50 years, but they'd recently had issues as a company and had shut down their facility here. And so we were lucky enough just to go and pretty much knock on the door through an email and say, what's happening with that oyster hatchery? One thing led to another, and all of a sudden we got hold of this building and were able to purchase it off them. So day one, we walked in here. It was a fully set up oyster hatchery with tanks and plumbing everywhere. It was crazy. And so it was pretty cool to spend basically the first month stripping out a lot of this gear. And that's where it started 5 years ago. About 2 years ago, though, finally we sort of were able to pick up buildings next door to us, which was an abalone farm. So we have an oyster hatchery and an abalone farm sort of next door. It's very much an old aquaculture area. And the abalone farm came around, eventually when the owners who were running it as actually a fish and chip shop for a while, they were in part of it were retiring, and they moved on, and so we're able to get hold of it, and which has been great because we've kind of doubled our production size of like our bond store size, and we've also added a tasting room to the whole place. So just getting up.
Just flashing up on the screen now, just a screenshot from the website, from the homepage. So definitely, it's a beautiful website. Awesome video that just showcases the location. It is really, really cool.
Just gets the juices going. So I imagine you've got planned the Waubs Harbour Festival, Whiskey Festival down the track. Is that in planning now?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
yeah, that'll be an international puller, that's for sure. Yeah. So you started distilling. So what was your approach? Were you brewing elsewhere and using other people's equipment and distilling elsewhere, or has it been on your site the whole time, or what's the journey?
Well,
you said 800 casks, did you?
Yeah, that's what we've got down at the moment. For the first year, we were mostly renovating the building to make it suitable to comply with a lot of regulation, that sort of thing, and then installation of all the equipment. So for the first most of the first year, we were doing that, and so then we started distilling, and so we've been distilling for around 4 years out of the 5. Right. And so we've just released product, but in the last 12 months, we've actually released what we called a preview series, which was actually the spirit that Rob produced on stills when he was working elsewhere in Tassie. So we produced the spirit elsewhere while we were installing our stills, but matured it in barrel here. And that's why we called it at the preview series, a bit of a taste of what's to come, and we were transparent about how that worked. And then recently, so that was sort of the last 12 months. Just recently, about a month or two ago, we released the first official Waubs Harbour whiskey that was fully made and matured at Waubs Harbour.
How different was that compared to the earlier product?
Yeah, so we've got I've got some of the our Bond 3 just in front of us. Actually, just happens to be here because we're going to do a tasting tomorrow night. But the Bond 3 is they're different sort of profiles. So that one there's like a pair of bourbon casks, and there's sort of like a pair of finished in bourbon casks. But our new core lines are more predominantly like bourbon with tawny base sort of in the background, and then and it kind of steps up in intensity through the core line our tawnies, and just like the highest level in our Founders Reserve is reserve stock from the best barrels, basically. So it's sort of it's sort of pivoted away from more Apera based whiskey into more tawny based, and there's a couple of reasons for it. One is we did have some actually another product called a double tawny in the Bond 3, and so we had this stock to play with. But then when we were designing our whiskies for Waubs Harbour, it's sort of like we definitely wanted to sort of try and push and showcase what maritime is and that Tasmanian malt. So like the key one really with our Waubs Original is all about showcasing that maritime malt, and it's the one that displays the best sort of like saline salted caramel characteristics, something you can really taste the provenance of the area. And then when you're stepping up in the tawny in the Port Storm and the Founders Reserve, it's sort of like just pushing up that Tasmanian profile, that big tawny richness. So it's sort of like you get the coastal effect and influence on the product, but then you're introducing extra flavour. Yeah. So it's sort of like a design different. Yeah.
One thing I recall many years ago at a masterclass with Jim McEwen from Brook Laddie, and he was talking about coastal and what actually happens, with just the amount of salt. Yeah, good plug. Salt. But how salt cut through whiskey, the salt air cut through whiskey, and it created a real citrus note.
Yeah.
Have you encountered that? And if you have, can you explain it to me? Because I can't get my head around how that would work.
I think sort of like the salt and what's going on scientifically up here is difficult to explain because there's a lot of things to sort of unpack, I suppose. There's a lot of variance. So like, we do different things with our yeast strains and heat regimes, all things that will mask sort of like what could be defined as maritime. But definitely just like the salt air and the proximity to the ocean, humidity and temperature in particular, like the way in which that like the ocean does a lot of the buffering of the temps. It doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold. You don't get a frost here, you don't get 40-degree days. So like what's going on there on the product, there's a few other parts to just the maritime, not just the salt. But I do notice just salt on its own, the ability to sort of cut through sweetness is what I see. And it sort of adds an extra layer or an ability to sort of, because you can pack a whiskey full of sweetness from like a bourbon cask or something like that, but it just cuts through the sweetness to add complexity and sort of makes that spirit richer, and it really does work. So
does Penguin add anything to?
Oh yeah, the resonance. It's the
aromatics. The aromatics.
Yeah.
the Penguin aromatic.
Guano.
Yeah.
If you hold your ear to a glass of Waubs Harbour, you can sometimes hear them.
Hear them chirping.
I think
now we're really shooting the shit.
I think you should have a chat with Peter Bignell and see what he can do with that.
Bring Pete up and let him smoke some penguin shit.
Yeah.
It'd be very fishy, I imagine.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So Rob, you've come from a real technical background, a scientific background. And Tim, it's clear you've got a deep understanding as well. So you put a lot of credence on brewing and the amount of, as I like to describe it, the flavor levers you can play with brewing, and as opposed to just making a very simple wash and throwing it in the still. You put a lot of, you mentioned you play around with yeast and that. So give us a rundown from a brewing perspective, specifically what excites you.
Yeah, for sure. So like, starting out with just like your base products, water and barley itself, like if you're not controlling those particular things, like you've got a lot of control just in the choices you make early on. Like, we use water from the site from here because we're trying to do a provenance-based product. So I don't actually do brewing salt additions or anything like that. That is something you could do, and you can get a completely different product by doing that, using that. Some people don't really go too much into that side of things, like water chemistry, and that's fine too. Like, you don't need to for the majority of what you're making, because it depends on what you're doing. But you know, it definitely is influential. Then, like your barley choice, like we do Tassie malt exclusively. I like to source off a singular farm when it happens to be a good season. Last season wasn't as good for him, but we've got a good supply this year. Otherwise, it's from other Tasmanian farmers. And then, like, you just, how you decide to use that. So just recipe builds. Like, it might be the strength of the wash, or the sugar concentration, basically, of like your particular temperatures. What are you trying to get active at what point? You know, to the sort of like the equipment decisions. So like choosing equipment. So like I have conical fermenters, for instance, and you sort of can see a lot of people use a lot of different things, but brewing techniques are important. They kind of get you to the point where you're just about to get to distillation. I think that it's very important in the early parts of brewing to get it right, and or at least have a planned output. Like, most people are just doing extraction and chuck yeast in. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about ferment temps. But like, you read one brewing book and it tells you all about what happens with brewing, like flavor with temperatures. So like, the brewers are onto this sort of stuff, and it definitely affects things down the line in whiskey. So, you know, for us, it's pretty important to make sure we're doing it on site. You get the control. You can pull those levers, and you can make it where you want it to go. And that means you can do things there's a whole heap of distillation technique that can change things as well, but you can start crafting new makes to fit barrels, as opposed to sort of creating just the same new make and sort of just slapping it in all barrels and looking for variants to sort of get across the line. So you've got a bit of freedom. Like, an example of like where cultivated yeast, for instance, like versus like a classic distiller's yeast is like, so like, you might have the distiller's yeast, you might get like apples and sort of cream, versus our like the other profile of like the cultivated yeast, I can get like oranges and chocolate. So I've got this whole other raft of just tools. I can make completely different products just using brewing techniques. So
I love it, mate. I love it. You go.
And that yeast, so your cultivated yeast, is that a yeast that you yourself have cultivated, or you?
Yes. So I basically grow everything else. So my background is in microbiology, really, and so that's how I sort of got into this side of it. It was something that I could take to the next level. It's something I understood. It was a lot of just, you know, sort of basic ecology sort of stuff, and what happens when you pitch two yeast strains into the same fermenter and how they interact, or, you know, various things happen, and there's so many variations and things you can sort of aim for, like, and a lot of things you don't expect, like if you mix a couple of different things together. So there's so much you can experiment with. I think for what we've done is a little bit more like, you've got to cut through all the endless sort of repetition and try and get to somewhere quickly. And so I basically went through and took from, like, in small scale trials, a bunch of different yeast trials, and sort of took them through to distillates, and then just based on flavour and sensory and gut feel on what I think's good and what's going to make a good whiskey, using the knowledge of what previous whiskies I've come across in my career, just to try and push that boundary and just sort of see where I can go with it. So it's definitely an area that really doesn't get much attention. It means a fair bit, but
circling back to the penguins.
I want to go to the brewing.
Yeah. Have you tried culturing a yeast from the penguins?
I've tried culturing yeast from the site. You got to be careful with what you culture. So like you can, if you're using
exactly.
but you can definitely get things
Could
to
it be
grow.
coli, perhaps? Yeah.
All right. But yeah, they don't usually come out that great. Like you're looking for flavour and yield, and one's going to suffer if you use penguin poo to do it. So
yeah. So that's enough of the penguin.
Okay, all right.
So one of
how do you go about cultivating your yeast?
So like the first part is like finding a sample or a swab. Like you might go and swab, like I've swabbed just about everything around here, and you're trying to grow things on like malt extract. So something that's going to grow on the product that malt is, like the sugars from the malt. If you can get a yeast to grow on it, and you can basically, that's the substrate they require, you can then take it further. So if it doesn't grow on it, it's not going to be what you want for a start, because you're giving them the food source they want. And then you can get different yeast from basically inside the distillery. You're sort of probably just capturing yeast that you've been using already. So it's a bit of a false thing. You think you're getting something new, but you're not. But then there's like a bunch of mutations that sort of stuff it up as well. But we've used one of the key ones I think that's important as well is that, so the majority of distilleries use like a commercially dehydrated yeast, and that's like your first roadblock. If you can't get a good yeast strain that's not dehydratable, then you can't ship it around the world. You can buy liquid yeast, but usually in small form. And that's where I've been doing a fair bit of work as well in the liquid yeast strain stuff. So so I think it's Y Labs or Y Yeast or something like that. I forget now, but there's a couple of different groups that make a lot of liquid cultures, and experimenting with those in particular has been pretty fruitful.
So it allows them to be able to, import different liquid yeasts from around the world, which you wouldn't be able to get commercially available in a dry source. And then cultivate it from a small sample. So say it comes in only 100 mils worth. Yeah. We need 300 litres of it to pitch a fermentation. So we grow it from that 100 mil size up to 300 litres, which takes a little while. Like that's a 4 or 6 process, cultivating it, and you have to go through these various stages. So that's one of the massive benefits. You can get yeast that you wouldn't be able to get normally by growing yourself. Yeah. And then the other form, like Rob has swabbed seaweed, for instance, which is not quite penguin, Luke, but that's one of the romantic sounding yeasts, but it's probably not going to work necessarily. Other things might, and done a lot of experimentation, and so it's been fun to watch the experiments come to life. So he has a lab here and gets in there. Does these small run distillations using these interesting yeasts that he's been making, and then before we go and commit to using it on our big system, because our wash drill is 3,600 litres, so it's a big commitment to go and take it to the big show. So he uses tiny little stills to start with, just to give you a bit of an idea of how it's going to come out in the new make, and it's been really interesting, and when some of the industry buffs come up and have a little taste in, around Tassie, come up and have a little taste of these new makes. And Rob's got like a whole shelf full of different experiments that he's done. It's really like one of those afternoons in the distillery, which is fun because, you can really see how much difference a yeast strain makes on a new make when all the other variables are fairly consistent.
What would be the most surprising thing that you've swabbed and had work?
Lay off the penguins. Lay off the fucking penguins.
Penguin.
We're gonna have the
armpit of a penguin.
Did you swab the armpit of a penguin? No. What would be the most surprising thing that you've been able to cultivate?
The mama penguin would have watched. The baby penguin would have. It would have been a very distraught situation for the family penguins. Carry on.
Someone has suggested in the chat mermaids, which we haven't seen one yet, but we're looking at
mermaid yeast.
Yeah.
I got to ask two questions. We'll come back to yours. So one's a statement. Two are statements. So one,
They're not really a question then.
no, not really a question at all. It's really exciting to have conversations like this, right? Because as you well know, first and foremost, we're distillers, right? And so by definition, we distill. And all the emphasis is on discussions around the still and the cuts and what we do in that. But the dirty secret is there's so much that happens in brewing, and there's so many people that appreciate that. And when you have a discussion with a distiller who brews, it's such an energetic conversation because this, as I said, there's so many levers we can play with, which is exciting. The second thing is, and you'll love this, guys. So one of Craftworks' original mash bills started off a stout beer. And the stout beer was from Zigzag Brewery. So I took the recipe, I broke it back, I took the oats out, and then I changed it so it was 100% barley, and away I went and created the I Am profile, base and roasted malts. And over the years, it's evolved. Anyway, finally, and I've wanted to do it for years, we've turned it back into beer, and we're actually releasing it as a beer called I Am Beer. But the interesting thing is I use M1 yeast, which is distiller's yeast, and Saison yeast, T58. And for the brew, we've switched it back to the original ale yeast, but also kept the T58, the Saison yeast. So what we've made is a stout, a very light stout, that's actually got, it's like a Belgium stout. It's got all these Belgium characteristics, the cloves and the banana and everything else. Yeah. It is so fucking cool because it's the mash bill taken back. It was the beer that became a mash bill that became a beer again. And we got a number of different mash bills that we'll explore as we go forward. But it just reinforces to me the power of yeast and the power of brewing and what you can do with it. So sort of share that with you because
that sounds awesome, and that's why they call you Crafty.
No.
Crafting out something awesome.
No, it's why I say it's my fucking distillery. I can do what I want. Even though my wife doesn't 100% agree on that, but anyway,
he still does it anyway.
I pitched the project to my wife, and she goes, "Oh, I don't know. It's going to cost a lot." So I said, "All right, I'll do it with Todd." And she said, "You always say that. If I say we can't do it, you go and talk to Todd." And Todd goes, "Okay, I'll be part of it." Anyway, Todd missed out, didn't you, Todd?
I missed out again, and I really wanted. Of all the projects we've done, this is the one I actually wanted to be part of. But I'll just help you sell the plonk later.
Anyway, yeah. So,
but yeasty business is fun.
Yeasty business is fun, but ferment time
it leads us into it's a good segue to highlight one of our sponsors.
Yeah. We'll have to introduce you to Josh from Mogwai Culture. So Mogwai is set up and basically coming in. He'll do yeast traps. He'll sample your location, your terroir, and then we'll make in the lab a yeast specifically for your business. Now he's only working with brewers, and I've been talking to him saying there's huge opportunities in the distilling space on this. So Josh is a sponsor now on Mogwai Labs, and we're going to shoot the shit with Josh in a couple of weeks, I think. So
Todd would know.
Yeah, Todd's got the itinerary. So tune in on that one, guys.
Yeah, because you haven't given me his details, you buffhead.
Oh shit! Okay, I'll need to sort that out. Okay,
so, but sometime in the near future, we'll have Josh on board. Yeah.
I can give you his details. I have.
Oh, please do.
But that's the sort of interesting thing that's coming into distilling space and craft distillers. You know, people say, "What's the Australian style of whiskey?" And are you going to have a similar sort of thing as Scotland with, you know, Speyside region, Lowlands, Island? It's not going to happen. Everyone's doing their own thing, aren't they?
Yeah, it's way more mixed in Australia, isn't it? There's a lot of experimentation, and would be hard to, there's definitely similarities out there, but there's not as many, obvious kind of regionality sort of traits, is there, as you might get in Scotland, because everyone's experimenting in different ways, which is part of the more whiskey factor and the innovation. And that's one of the cool things about being in a region like this.
I agree. I would suggest Tassie's got more similarity in style because how it started, how people learnt how to make whiskey and basically wanted to use Nat Lewis stills, for example. There's a lot of Nat Lewis stills in that, and stick with the same sort of mash bill. I think the mainlanders are more expansive in styles, and probably stills. It's because it's not as old as Tasmania, which is we're only 30 years old, the modern day distilling industry. So it's not that old. Yeah. So question. So to me, there's some similarities between what you guys are doing and what Furno's doing. And you both sort of come on the scene fairly similar. Do you guys talk, swap notes and that?
They're cool. They're awesome. We love what they're doing up there, which is not that far away from us.
Yeah.
On Flinders. They were a very similar time, actually, that they started out. And we didn't really know about each other. We were in very much stealth mode for several years. We didn't go down the path of doing gin or anything else. We were just whiskey purists. And so we didn't even have a sign on the building for about 3-4 years. So no one really knew about us. We didn't put social media up until we needed it, years later. Yeah. Which is partially why, a bunch of people...
Completely opposite from us, in other words.
Complete opposite.
So no, Furno are doing some great things up there, and looking forward to seeing those guys at the whiskey shows more and more over time. For sure.
They're in an interesting spot too. So you're right on the eastern side of Tassie there.
Do we happen to have a map?
And Flinders is up on the northeastern side. So they're in a similar climate of Tasmania, because Tasmania, you could sort of, you've definitely got differences between east and west coast in Tasmania, between climate styles. But in general, it's all pretty well cold. And it's fairly wild when you're right on the ocean. So you definitely get different regions within it. Like where we are very exposed to a pretty wild ocean. Like we can't show you, but we're looking out the window at darkness now, but only a couple of hours ago, it was quite wild. Like it's a pretty rough day today. And the floor in the bond stores today is saturated. And it's saturated because it's just this, in my car, when I got into it today, my hands were slipping on the steering wheel, not just because it's an old car, but it's this very salty kind of air. And today was a really great example of that, because it was very when you get some of these fronts coming through, it's just like a blanket of salt water that hits everything, which is the bane of our lives here too, by the way.
Rust.
Some of our just being destroyed. We install something and 6 months later we're painting it. We've painted the base of the silo 4 times already, which is galvanized steel, because it just doesn't run here. And so the bond store today, no shit, like it was the floor was saturated. It looks like someone's been mopping it or something. And it's just because the years and years have, this building's been around for decades, especially the Ab Farm's 70 years, and salt has just penetrated that place. So as soon as you get humidity in the air, it grabs hold of that salt and everything's wet. And it's just a great example of how saline it is right here and on a very exposed shelf on the coast. And, you see it on the barrels too. The barrel rings are super rusty.
I was going to say that'd be an issue for you, wouldn't it? You have to watch your hoops big time.
So, regardless of the hoops, do you sort of have a bit of a crustation of salt all over your barrels?
Yeah, lightly, like on the timber itself. And, you know, barrels lose a lot of, as we know, to angel share. They're a breathing, living vessel under pressure. And so you get these temperature changes and the humidity up and down. And so you'll see these barrels breathing in this kind of saline environment. And we're not like trying to, we don't have, one of the great things about this kind of industry is that we don't have to really educate people on great maritime whiskies, because the Scottish have been doing it for us for about 200 years. Yeah. We're just doing it in a different provenance, and that's Tasmanian. So it's really interesting to see. We're getting some great industry feedback from people that are trying our whiskies now and picking up those subtle different notes that add something to the whiskey. And you know, it's not like, you know, adding salt to your whiskey, because who knows what that tastes like, but it's about how that enhances different flavors. You know, the toffees turn salted caramel, or the way that a sweetness might be able to dial it down with a bit of savouriness from that salt.
I would think you potentially, and I'm just spitballing, but you could pick up quite an umami type note too if you're using really heavy fortified casks. Are you getting that sort of profile starting to come through?
Yes, people have been saying exactly that as well. It's an interesting thing just to describe into a whiskey. It's definitely been in like the food scene for a long time, and I haven't heard it much in my time in whiskey as a descriptor, but it's coming in now, and I've heard it a few places. Yeah, it's a level just to finding another whiskey.
Have you thought of putting a barrel on a boat in the harbour there
with a penguin? Go on, say it.
Leave the penguins
say
alone.
It. You want to say with a penguin. Come on.
I knew that was going to
be why not just sink a barrel in the harbour
with a penguin?
Well, the penguins swim around it if they want, but
yeah, we kind of don't need to, because as much as you might try, the building is saturated in this.
I'm thinking more the motion of the ocean.
Yeah.
Barrel.
Well, it's been. I know that's.
The salt.
Seen that before, right? There's been several distilleries in China
that sent a barrel around the world or something on a yacht, and another one that stayed here or something. And I don't know who that was, and I wasn't in the ballot to get a bottle of either of them.
Keith Batt put a barrel on his yacht, but it was empty. I'm just saying.
Beats the whole fucking purpose, doesn't it?
Okay, let's not go there and let Tim finish his conversation.
Yeah. Anyway.
So sorry, you got to rein them in at times. So I
mentioned low pressure systems. So that is something with our distillery. We get a lot of storms that come through. They blow off the plains, and those low pressure systems, we believe, has a massive impact on the maturation of the whiskey. We see our barrels hiss and groan, and you see bungs go. You see that? You would get a lot of low pressure systems come through.
You sort of get the highs whip across the Bass Strait and sort of go down a little bit into the Tasman Sea across to New Zealand. Right. And as it happens, you sort of see the offshore storms, and we get those easterlies, and that's what's happening today, which is why it's so humid. But that quick change in atmospheric pressure or rise or fall, like you definitely get the suck or the pop. It's definitely affecting barrels.
Yeah, it's a real thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You walk in and half the barrels are leaking some days, and then next day it's
they suck up tight.
Yeah.
Is there too much pressure for a barrel either way? Where do you reckon?
Yeah, the barrel it'll find its weakest point.
And,
how many have you lost?
We haven't lost any to pressure. Unless it's a contributing factor, but structurally it's all about how it has that oak performing, and or if there's it's a natural product, so it's just gonna, if it cracks, it cracks. So you can't. I don't know if you can test that through pressure, but if it's high pressure inside the barrel trying to escape it, pop that bung, but it doesn't actually. Yeah,
that's a great question. From Johnny Holton there. G'day,
good
John.
question.
Put up a question on screen here. Do you think pressure has more of an impact than temperature?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is a huge impact because of the way it pulls in and out of the actual the oak itself. Like it's the thing that's driving it through in and out. Temperature sort of helps, but temperature is this thing that so like chemical reactions occur faster at high temperatures. So there's also a correlation between like whiskey maturation and temperature. But for us, like we've got that stabler environment. We don't have that high or that low. Like so, we're sort of sitting in the middle and letting that pressure do its thing. So I think I don't necessarily know if they're one outweighs the other, but they're both definitely important.
There you go, John. Political
Pressure's one that's not talked about much, is it?
Oh yeah,
it is a real thing.
Yeah, I think I've been talking a lot about pressure since early Overeem days. That was a big part of it. I think what they were doing down there with a lot of their maturation.
Yeah. It's something we learned as we went along.
Milk and Honey make a comment on that with their Dead Sea.
Yeah. Todd, talk about it.
So the Dead Sea whiskey's been aged at 400 meters below sea level. So they have a different pressure rating than the rest of us, and they couldn't leave it
meters below sea level.
Yeah, and they couldn't leave it there for the entire maturation because it was too difficult on their whiskey.
Yeah, on the point of pressure, it's for us. I don't think it's like necessarily where it sits, if it's high or low. It's at the change. It's about how
backwards and forwards.
Yeah. That's the thing that gets it moving. Yeah.
Youngie put a comment up from YN Oak. Pull that back up. Yeah, he's right. Andrew Young, so Master Cooper from YN Oak in the Barossa.
And a sponsor.
And a sponsor. We've been talking about it for many years. And it is something.
And you still won't learn.
No, well, I've learned it. I know. I understand it now. Asshole.
There's a difference between learning and knowing and putting in practice.
Can you throw the fucker under the bus? Throw him under the bus. Come on, throw him under the bus now.
Oh, no, there's another question. 60 hertz.
Oh, yeah. Angel share. Really good. So you would be going down, wouldn't you?
Like in ABV? No.
Yeah.
You're going up. Which is interesting as well.
You got high humidity.
Yeah, and that's provided by the ocean. The hot day, it evaporates the water. It's like I think that the humidity here is quite high. It doesn't get that, like the hotter it gets, you'd expect the less humidity there would be. But there's also like that evaporative sort of thing off the sea that brings the humidity back. You get that afternoon sea breeze every hot day that sort of pushes through the distilleries. So yeah, we're getting. I can say that with certainty. It is all increasing in ABV.
Wow.
That doesn't mean that we're getting the same lows out though. Like we're still getting dropping of volume, just the same as everywhere else. But the ABV going up.
And what is your share, Angel share?
I think it's getting close to 15%, something like that, over the course of. So I think the first year you lose a fair bit just in the like it's sucking into the oak, and then so call it 5 to 8%, and then 3% every year after that, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And Williams posted a question there. So salt drawing the water out of the barrels, or is
that's a good question.
Yeah, I haven't thought of that before. That's a good point, because the salt definitely does do that. That's like literally what is happening on the floor of the bond store, and there's other examples around the boiler and such where that is happening, where the salt is picking up the moisture from the atmosphere, and if that salt is sitting on the barrel, there's something to that. Yeah,
that's
makes sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to ask that question of Mark Rainier of Waterford, who's ex-Brook Laddie, right? And we know, that's a coastal one. So I'm going to ask that question because it'll be intriguing. I've never.
17th of August, you can ask that question.
Oh, actually, yeah, we got Mark Rainier from Waterford on, and yeah, let's do a quick plug. It's going to be very much one focused on terroir and barley, and we're going to have Stu Wycross from Voyager Craft Malt on. So it's going to be a deep dive, and we've had a taste of Mark Rainier to give you some idea.
I haven't posted him yet.
You haven't?
I haven't put that video up yet.
Oh, you got to put it up.
I've got to find time to fix my fuck up with the start of the recording.
Yeah,
because I forgot to hit go live, and
Oopsie.
started. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
they
didn't miss much.
We did a thing. So I approached.
You did a thing.
We did a thing. Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit. I approached Waterford, and I'd known Waterford through Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit. Listen to the episode of Ned Gahan from Waterford. It was one of our earlier episodes a few years ago. And I said to Ned, mate, Waterford's not in Australia. It makes no sense. You sell a little bit in Dan's, but there's nothing out there. And you guys would have a cult following in Australia because of Brooke Laddie and Mark Rainier and Jim McEwen, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I convinced them to send some samples out. And I said, we'll do a whiskey tasting. I'll debrand from Craftworks. I got Dave Withers from Archie Rose to debrand, and Nick Hope from Dusty Barrel, who does rice whiskey, to debrand. And we presented a night of Waterford. 40 in the room, 40 live. 40 on the room, 40 on Zoom. It was really, really good night. But the funny thing was, we got Waterford on, and the head distiller, Ned, was only going to be on for 10 minutes. He stayed for the whole session. So I'm presenting Waterford with over my shoulder is the Waterford head distiller, right? Which was very cool. But the founder, Mark Rainier, we wanted him to come on for just the wave. Just come on screen and go, hello, you're all doing very well. I'm Mark Rainier from Waterford. You're doing very well. Thank you very much for your support, and go. And we thought we'd do well to do that. And 5 minutes before, Waterford said, he can't do it. And I went, oh, come on, Mark's got to come on for, just say wave, just wave, that's it. And they go, oh, all right. So Mark pops on the screen. The fucker wouldn't shut up. Half an hour.
Could not.
Yeah.
We're
Enjoying it.
there in the background going, we're going to wind him up.
We're going to wind him up. And when he started swearing, we went, yes, okay.
He's our man. Yeah.
He's a man. He's coming to Australia. So he's coming to Australia. When he comes to Australia, we're bringing him to Tassie, and we're coming to your joint for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome.
There are a few more questions
great
during that story.
Go.
All right. Owen says, is there a specific whiskey that you tasted that led you to try and replicate or emulate to get your flavour?
That's a good question. It's a little bit of a dual response here. There's two parts to this. It's not necessarily like your classic maritime whiskey answer, because early days we were quite influenced by that beautiful, rich, fortified, heavy character kind of whiskey that Tasmania produced, and one of the great examples of that was Overeem whiskey, and it was Robert making, and so we just love using those high quality port casks, and still do today. One of our three whiskies in our core line, we've got the Waubs Original, the Port Storm, and the Founders Reserve. And the Founders Reserve is this beautiful pure port cask at cask strength 62%, and just uses those classic nice old port barrels, a lot out of the Barossa, and something that the industry's been using for a little while. And at the same time, we love a rich, oily whiskey, but we're also absolutely loving the use of less cask influence and more straight bourbon barrel, because we're after more of a spirit-driven whiskey, and we're after those funny notes, just pure, nice, just that nice idea of brininess that you'll find, less masked by the port cask or the fortified cask, and more just straight down the line in a bourbon cask. So, which is what you'll see in our range, we literally have the Waubs Original, which is mostly American oak bourbon cask, although it does have a tiny marriage of a little bit of tawny cask in there, which just helps it give this nice little raisiny sort of finish, or a little bit on the nose as well. But it's mostly about that American oak, and therefore more so about the spirit. But then you move through to the Port Storm, which is a bit more port driven, and then the Founders Reserve, which is pure port driven and all about a rich, deep whiskey. You'll still see some maritime influence in there for sure, but in a different way. More about how that emphasises or enhances some of those beautiful raisiny sort of notes.
And how did you go? So you've got first release and batch 2 out now. So first release is all gone, except for obviously your reserve stock. How did you find getting consistency, or did you try and get consistency between batch 1 and batch 2?
Yeah, it's a funny thing, but barrels are always changing every year. So you can't get consistency in barrels in supply, but you can do things in your marriages, in your blending to get consistency between your additions and looking at what exactly is it that creates that whiskey, the profile in particular, like what are you actually aiming for? And so some of the hallmarks of like what does the say Waubs Original need to have to be of that brand, and the additions can be subtly different, but we're still looking at that clear bourbon malt backbone. So there's the biscuit, there's the salted caramel, and then that little bit of tawny on the finish. So it's a working of balance really. So you sort of celebrate the individualism of each batch, yet that's the same profile. So it's just the nature of craft distilleries.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the question because I know there's people that want to ask this question. 2 questions, so not statements, questions. Todd.
Oh, good.
2 questions.
Yeah,
So,
all right. Just answer it then.
I will. I'm getting there. I'm building anticipation. Are you going to? Excuse me. Are you going to make a peated maritime whiskey? Question 1.
Yeah, good question. Yes, is the short answer, and we already have it in barrel. We really want to make a genuine Waubs Harbour Provenance peated whiskey, though. Not so much into the idea of importing peated grain, and so we've got this amazing salt marsh peat bog, which is only about 10 k's away from where we are. And we've done a lot of experimentation because you go up and down this river that ends up, in the ocean, and so it's very salty down near the ocean, and then gets obviously fresh when you get more inland. And so we've done a lot of different trials with different peats up and down this river. We've been down there digging it out ourselves. We know a farmer that has like 10,000 acres along this thing, so it's been been really interesting. Yeah, so Rob gets in the lab there, smokes the malt, and in this sort of meth lab looking apparatus, and on small scale. And we've got some really cool examples of a very unique peat, because peat from the Highlands, even in Tasmania, but certainly in Scotland, is made from more classic sort of mosses, like sphagnum moss. But down on the inner salt marsh, you don't have moss. You have reeds, and you have this very salty sort of succulent that is a ground cover, and then the local kind of melaleuca tree, tea tree stuff. So very different organic material, and therefore very different smokiness, and therefore different flavour. And we have that in barrel. So watch the space, because probably in about 12 months or so, you'll see it roll out as a limited release.
So is it sort of giving you...
I had a second question. Let me get my second
question. All right. You guys' second question. Why are you trying to take all the questions, eh?
I said you took so long with the first one, we forgot about that.
Because I'm going to help Todd. Because
right.
Todd,
I seriously doubt you're helping me by pinching all my questions.
Listen carefully. After I ask my second question, we're going to throw Todd under the bus.
Fantastic. I seriously cannot wait.
Todd, we're giving Todd 5 minutes warning.
I doubt it.
5 minutes warning to prepare for throwing Todd under the bus.
Because they won't let me ask my questions throughout the program.
No, it's all good. So my second
Yeah,
question.
ask your bloody question, would you?
All right, my second question. I'm not going to go into details, but let's just say there is some seismic shifts and challenges happening in the wood front on the Australian landscape right now as far as sourcing of barrels. And for us, as we all know, making whiskey, barrels are absolutely essential. If you don't have barrels, you can't make whiskey. So my question is two parts. One, what cooperages do you currently work with? Is it mainly just on Tasmania? And two, how do you set your wood policy? Because you're using bourbon casks, old fortifieds and others, I imagine. What is your wood policy?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different cooperages. We try and spread the eggs there, really.
Right.
The thing about wood procurement or oak procurement it's not new at all. I think we've all been saying it for years and years and years. It's getting rarer and it's getting rarer. And every year there seems to be some allotment that just comes from nowhere. And like that's the optimistic view, where there is always something that you can get that is within the profile you're seeking. But it is, like you say, it is getting harder and harder and harder. So I think we base a lot of our trust in relationships in particular, in who we use and where we source, and try and leverage the long-standing relationships. Yeah. But we also trial new things as well. So like we've got new bourbon producers online and sort of like and trying to evolve that space as well, because you've got to be on the front foot. You've got to be working that hard. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, I remember Tim Duckett saying fairly recently that old wood fortifieds are going to push $2,000 for a barrel.
Yeah. We're already paying.
Not long ago, $400.
Yeah, we're already paying like up to $1,200 for a good fortified. So it's just that's the price. And
a good question from David, Carolyn Taylor there. Because
hey,
this is just cool. Hey, yes. Thanks for your questions tonight too. Yes, it says, would you use a Freycinet barrel? So Freycinet wine are only located close by, and they produce some amazing wine down there. And actually, coincidentally, I was down there yesterday, and we do have spirit in their barrels. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's another watch this space answer.
And on that note,
hold on.
Yes, I saw that. I read that.
8,000 acres.
Yeah, I read that
forest.
2 days ago. The American market is very, very interesting right now because there is a wood shortage. I'm talking to American distillers, small craft distillers, and they're saying they're in queues to get wood. And that's new American oak first char barrels, and they're struggling. And there's serious conversation in America about changing the legislation to allow bourbon producers to use refills, which will just be an absolutely seismic shift on the scene, particularly Scotland. Scotland's
world.
It'll rock Scotland, it'll rock the world. So anyway, side thing. And on that note, I think it's time.
And now it's time for Throw the Todd under the bus.
5 minutes later, he's thought about it. He's got some good questions. Go.
Okay, so firstly tonight, I used to like 60 hertz, but the bastard pinched my question, so I don't like him anymore.
Oh, that's an easy thing. Fake news.
So secondly, shut up, would you? It's my time in the sunlight. I don't need any talk from the red-headed guy.
I'm gonna mute us.
Yeah,
I'm gonna mute us.
Please do. It's so much better when they're not talking. Anyway, so guys, the question I wanted to ask is: you're talking about you have a 3,000 litre wash still? What sort of stills do you run?
Yeah, we've got Naplua stills with steam coil, 3,600 and an 1,800 litre. So wash and spirit still combo.
Cool.
Wow.
So both they are one still.
Yeah. They're stills that, I mean, we went for those stills mostly because Rob was very used to using those. It's a fairly traditional Tassie kind of still to use. And
I've worked out something I can do. It's really fantastic. Did you notice what I did there?
Oh yeah, you just nice.
It's more intimate all of a sudden.
Where's Crafty?
Sorry, interrupted you guys. Could you please?
Yeah, no, it's the same. I mean, it's a fairly squat steel and classic Tassie steel where we get those nice rich flavors. But it's a steel by Napalua that Rob was used to using down at Overeem and at Lark as well.
All right. I'll let them back in because they'll get upset otherwise.
He let us back in.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Was it a good question? We got no idea.
Kind of think it's better if they're not there. So sort of, where do you see the your business going? Are you going to try some more barrels combinations or?
Yeah, good question. That's a very open-ended question. Where do we see it going? Yeah, it's exciting times for us because we've only just properly launched really in the last few months. Whiskey's a slow-moving beast, isn't it? So around for 5 years, but only just launched. We've launched well though. It's been awesome to have great support around us down in the Tassie industry and afar from some of the great distilleries up there as well, like yourselves. And when we launched about a month ago, we sold out of batch one pretty quick. It helped because we auctioned off our bottle number one of our Founders Reserve, which went for $4,800. And so that kind of drew a frenzy for the Founders Reserve, which ended up batch one sold out in a couple of hours online that night. In fact, I think we sold about 600 bottles all up in the first night online, just to our email list that's been sort of following us. We hadn't really sort of been heavily promoted or anything, but we've just been sort of, gaining a bit of momentum over 5 years through people finding out about us and following us on our email list. Maybe they're coming to visit us in Bicheno. And so, we launched and it went really well. We sold out of batch one and then we launched batch two, and that's winding down now too. So we're currently making
the craft distillers
coming up batch three, so that's going to be fun.
Cool. We're just on your website about to buy a couple of bottles.
Awesome.
Quick.
I like how you unmuted yourself to tell us that.
Yeah. So tell us about your branding. It's very, very clean. It speaks of maritime. So where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, when we first started this whole business and venture and challenge and mission, what it's like in running a distillery, we just wanted to, our number one sort of mandate was just to do everything really genuine and authentic. So we just sort of went let's not try to, be too marketing-y. We just wanted to go, if we have a great genuine story where we genuinely love the product, we make a really solid maritime product, then we won't have to spin marketing. We'll just snap pictures. And that's pretty much what we do here. We go out and we take some pictures and we put it on social media, and that's our marketing. It's a simple recipe, and it's because we've got a nice genuine story there. And so we just kept it clean and kept it minimalistic and kept the genuine story. So on our new bottle, we just, keep the story real. We've got a little imprint of the crested tern, which is a bird that sits on the island next to us here. Didn't want to use a penguin? Yeah, amongst the penguins. They literally do sit amongst the penguins. Yeah, and amongst the seals and dolphins, and there's 1,000 whales out there because they're all migrating.
Can I give you an idea? You got to have a bottle, right? You got to have the canister there, right? And you've got to have a penguin on the side poking its head and just looking at it.
That's
photobomb with a penguin.
That is such
the dad jokes are out. Tony Holson's comment, turn it up, mate. after the crested turn.
So just so you guys know, John's going to be in your position on the 31st of August, so feel free to join us and give him shit back.
I will. I'll be bringing up the head. Yeah. Although that man does make some excellent.
Oh, he
Irish.
does. Yeah.
So I'll be there with the Irish jokes. Not as good as the Irish can tell it, of course, but.
I reckon at the end of the year we need to do a Christmas Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit and have like
Christmas
special and just have 20 of us on at once and just fucking hang
That'll
shit on
be
each other.
chaos.
I don't know how many we can do at once. I'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, let's do it. Fuck it. It's our podcast. We can do what we want.
It'll just be a.
I've had 12 on the go, so we can get to at least 12. Yeah.
When did you do that? We didn't know about it.
We weren't.
No, that was BMWC.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, we can do it.
The Blue Mountains Whiskey Club.
Yeah.
Christmas.
So anyway, back to our special guests.
We don't
Yes.
get invited.
Yeah, sorry.
to those things.
I digress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know whether we've got any more questions that have come.
what are we at
Into
time wise?
So one question that's come up, I don't think we've asked yet, and since you've been going for 5 years, I sort of vaguely get an idea of maybe where we're going with this question. But what's your oldest barrel to date in the store?
Yeah, we started distilling 4 years ago. Yeah, I'm here, so it'd be about that. 4 years old.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a range of different casks. We're not using anything under about 60 litres, and most of them are hundreds. We've got a bunch of 200s down, some 300s sort of size. So looking for some proper age in those, of course. But generally with our barrel format, like our sizing, we're going after fairly long maturation, and we find this climate here with a fairly stable maturation. You know, as much as the humidity plays a part, and some of these rises and falls in pressure, we also find being next to the ocean, you don't get huge temperature fluctuations. So you don't get you never see a frost, even when I leave home sometimes, which is inland just slightly, or driving along the coast, you'll see frost along the road. But when you're down on the ocean front, you don't see that, because the ocean temperature of the seawater is buffering the temperature, and so you don't get those cold temperatures, and you don't get the hot ones either. Everyone knows when you've been on the beach, it's generally colder than it is if you're just inland slightly on a hot day. And so because of those more stable climate, we're able to mature for longer. And so, in a 50 or 60 litre barrel, we're maturing that in a minimum time of more like 3.5 years, whereas, many environments you might pull that out after only 2.5 years. So, hundreds certainly wouldn't be considered before 5 years, but it's probably more like 5.5. And 200s we haven't obviously seen yet, but they're long-term barrels, no doubt.
So due to that extra long maturation that you're having to work with there, you didn't consider going into more smaller barrels to sort of speed that up and get to market quicker?
That was a bit of a quality question. Smaller barrels are tempting, of course, because you can get the whiskey out of it, but there also is generally a question over quality, because you don't get the consistency, and there's nothing like spirit that's maturing for longer chemically itself. And so to allow it to sit in barrel for longer and mellow out was something that Rob was certainly a big believer in. Didn't want to do too much of that sort of small cask maturation.
Yeah. My personal belief on 20s is they're salt and pepper. They're great in blends to salt and pepper something, get a certain nuance to it, but on their own, they're beasts. They can be good, they can be bad. Yeah, they're too much hard work. I'm going to ask a question about peeling back what's going on in Tasmania right now. So you've got 60 whiskey distilleries in Tasmania, is that right? Have I got the count right?
It's hard to know. I think there's 80 distilleries. I don't know how many would do whiskey and then sort of commercially. I'd guess that it was closer to 40 or 50 that were sort of into whiskey, and you know, half of
so
them.
say 50, and there's the statesman distilleries of Tasmania, and you mentioned Overeem, Lark, and others, right? And the new guys on the block, not you, but I mean just in general, the new guys that are coming on the scene. So what is the Tasmanian whiskey community like? Is it still very, very open and supportive of each other, or are you starting to see the elbows start to come out a bit as there's more and more people coming on the scene?
Fisticuffs. Yeah. No. I think it's actually
Fisticuffs. He said it.
Fisticuffs. Yeah. It's all about that.
Edit this.
It's all we're doing. Yeah. It's just, yeah. No, it's actually very collaborative still. And, you know, it's always been great for that. We've heard, you know, countless times, but I can testify to, you know, being a part of the TWSA. I'm personally part of one of the sort of subcommittees of that. And yeah, it's really cool to be, you know, chatting with 5 other distilleries in a subcommittee of the TWSA, and also turning up to different whiskey events and getting along. And because I think that it remains true, and I think within the Australian industry as well. In fact, I think it's probably truer than ever in a way that we need to collaborate and be friends, because I think for 20 or 30 years, we've been building an industry, but it's actually, for me, the next 5 years, 10 years especially, is where we really put it's really where we test out this industry on an international level. And we really need to band together to make sure we do that justice. We need to make sure that our brand, a Tasmanian brand from Tasmania's perspective, but also the Australian brand, is seen globally in a good light. And I think that, you know, if you look at it that way, it's certainly like we've got to, you know, still the old rising tide floats all boats. Yes, there's going to be a few hardships along the way, as domestically it'll become more competitive as more distilleries pop up. But we're also building the amount of penetration that the Australian industry can do within Australia. Yeah. So I think there's still room, but certainly on an international level, let's band together and you know, represent, because we've got something pretty special to show the world. The world doesn't know it yet, and yeah, it's going to be interesting.
I like to say, a rising tide floats all boats, which is the classic Bill Lark thing. But there's a few battleships in the harbour, and we just had HMS Single Malt in the harbour, and there's been agreement reached on that, and that is now, that ship is firmly docked.
Wouldn't they be more likely to be icebergs?
I like battleships, because there's some battleships. There's definitely some battleships. Okay, so here's a question for you. The excise 350 cap rebate, which is not actually a rebate, but you know what I mean. Double-edged sword for the industry, as in, it's great for the small guys and getting a leg up, and you know, like for ourselves, it's enabled us to employ a few people to do markets and push out more, and it's fantastic. But the double-edged sword is, the excise was a barrier to entry that's been lowered, and now there's people coming into the industry and going, hey, I can make some good money here, not realizing that this industry is fucking hard. What's your take on it?
I wouldn't have. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have thought that was like, oh, you know, let's jump in. That was an easy, like, you know, I didn't think that really lowered the barrier to entry by a long way, because whiskey, I mean, other spirits are different, but whiskey is certainly an expensive barrier to start with. I wasn't really thinking about excise rebate or whatever that sort of meant. I just knew it was going to be bloody expensive kind of industry to start with. So, you know, I wouldn't have thought about it that way myself. You know, excise continues to rise on the other side of the coin. So it's sort of, it feels a bit like the excise rebate is all grand, but excise sort of continues to rise, so that the benefit sort of gap seems to close.
The roads, yeah.
So the excise goes up, interest rates go up,
CPI and the CPI
CPI
adjustment. We're going to hit $100 allow in the next increase on excise. $100 allow. We're the third highest taxed nation on the planet for excise, and it was a beautiful thing. I actually posted it on the ADA Facebook page. It was Will Edwards from Will Edwards from Archie Rose, and he very eloquently explained what the impact was and how he said, and I cannot remember the exact numbers, but it was in cents. If you a a standard drink of wine, it's like 30 cents. A 30 standard drink of spirits is like $1 something, which is it's something to be.
It'd be nice if we're all on a equal playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. My last question of the night, because we're coming to the end, is Australia is on the verge of being a powerhouse on the world stage. And you mentioned it, Tim. You know, people don't know, but the quality of whiskey that's coming out of Australia, the diversity of flavour is phenomenal. So,
I'd go as far as the quality of spirit coming out of Australia.
Quality of spirit, yeah. Well, good example. Karoo Distillery, good friends of ours. They won world's best, contemporary gin, and they backed it up with world's best infused vodka. Husband and wife team in New South Wales.
We also have world best rums kicking around Australia now.
Yeah, exactly. So Australian spirits are punching well above their weight, right? So what happens when the world goes, we all want Australian? Are we at a stage where we can back it up?
Yeah, good question. Because I think that there's some super great quality spirits coming out of Australia, but there are, I guess, going forward, what we're going to see is some of the bigger volumes are going to be the representations out there, and that's where you might raise the eyebrows a little and question whether the representation is going to be what you're talking about. Is it going to be the high quality that you're talking about? Because a lot of the high quality comes out of these craft industry where you're creating these really unique, beautiful, say, whiskies in what we're talking about here tonight.
Yeah.
Created out of a very, labor of love and, where quality is at the forefront. But when you have to go more commercial to create a whiskey that's more accepted globally, because of price point especially, sacrifices have to be made. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword there, I guess. And it's a bit of a question around, how we're going to achieve that quality that we want as an industry on a world stage, when, Craftworks hasn't got the volume to hardly export, let alone sort of,
I can barely cover my local area. Hang on, let me add to that, Tim, because this is something I feel very, very passionate about. The likes of Starwood and what Starwood did with Twofold, I think is absolutely game changer on the international scene. And the reason why is because it's created a landing strip where people are going, hey, I might step away from my Jim Beam and I'll try this Australian Twofold, and hey, it's not bad. And what else is out there? If I spend more money, what else is out there? So I see it as a landing strip for pulling people into Australian whiskies and exploring, and maybe they pick up a bottle of Craftworks or Waubs Harbour or Furno or whatever. So the big guys and what they're doing is really important for the little guys like us. I firmly believe that. And I know there's distillers that go, yeah, but they're lowering the price and no, it's not good for all of us, etc., etc. I seriously think it's the landing strip. It's getting the message out there to a broader audience and getting people to step away from their Jack Daniels and their Jim Beam and their Johnny Walker and try something different.
Yeah, no, great point. And it's a really sort of generic example of that is the classic Japanese industry, right? Like, they've paved their way, but there wouldn't be small Japanese whiskies that are struggling out there to try to export, right? That'd be taken, and it's a good example. The small players can ride the coattails of the bigger guys that have been there, done that, set the marketing budgets high, and then the smaller guys can kind of come in there, and often maybe even with a high quality product.
Well, there's a good comment. Never mind twofold. My American friends are drinking single cast strength bottles of Starwood in the US. So, yeah. So
we'll have to keep that question for a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah. We got David Vitelli from Starwood, straight from the US. It's going to be a Saturday session coming up, which is awesome. We might start to wind it up. What are we at?
We're almost at the hour and a half, so let's go through the sponsors.
Yep, let's do that.
We do have one last comment come through here from 60 Hertz. Starwood pushing into the US with barrel picks in the last couple of years in a big way.
Cool. We'll cover that off in a couple of weeks.
It does help that Dave is over there able to wave the flag.
Yeah, but he says it's a hard slog. It's a hard slog.
Bet it is.
Yeah, and we'll talk to him about it.
Indeed. All right, so let's
he's the trailblazer.
Go to our sponsors. We've already spoken about a couple of. Actually, I think we've mentioned.
Do we sponsor ourselves?
Well,
no.
Yeah.
Is that in our budget? We haven't talked about it.
Well, the amount of fucking effort I put in.
Carry on.
Yeah, good.
Right.
So
on the left,
we have already spoken about a couple of them. Youngie, who was on earlier, Wine Oak Cooperage. Does he have capacity?
No.
Who knows?
That's the red icon on the bottom left-hand corner, people, in case you're wondering.
I'm going to have to change his logo to actually put Wine Oak.
Well, we can just talk to it.
I'll just do it.
All right, next.
We've already spoken about Mogwai Labs.
Mogwai Labs.
Who also we will have on at some point once I give Todd the details to line that
Please
up.
do.
Voyager Craft Malt without
Sometime in August, I expect.
Sorry, what?
Sometime in August, I expect.
Yeah, cool. We'll sort that out after this.
That
Voyager.
That will be a yeasty deep dive.
If there was no Voyager, there'd be no Craftworks. I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
Big statement.
But true.
But true.
If you need glass, get it from Saver Glass.
Saver Glass. If there's no Saver Glass, my liquid would be on the floor.
That's right. Even more so than it is already.
And if you like gin, jump onto the Australian Gin Appreciation Society on Facebook.
And as we talked earlier, tomorrow is
what?
Gin Day.
Oh, it's Gin Day tomorrow.
Oh, Gin Day.
Perfect.
I'm not sure about AGAS. It's just not it doesn't roll off the tongue.
You're going to have to talk to Ben about
Talk to Ben about it.
I've got a guess. Yeah. Anyway.
I think he literally whipped up the logo whilst we were at the show.
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah. While we were working at the Sydney show, I said to him, "Oh, so you're sponsoring us?" And he's like, "Oh yeah."
Fuck, I haven't got a logo.
Oh yeah, I haven't even got a logo on the Facebook page. I better do that. And
he did.
He did. I said to him that I was sort of picturing it like a country women's association type thing.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that.
No.
But I like what he did.
Just don't like AGAS.
Yeah, we do like the fact that
never badmouth the sponsors. I know.
Don't. It's the best thing.
We do like the fact that
we used to have Dave and Pam from Transwood as a sponsor last year, and the tagline was "Don't call us, we'll call you," because we got no capacity to do anything.
That's a
test. You may notice that they're no longer sponsors of ours.
They're no longer sponsors.
Yeah. So, yeah, fair enough.
No,
They don't need
I
to work.
like
They're
to think that's
busy enough.
because they don't have any capacity, not because we're just shit.
No, there's no capacity. Anyway,
You were
we'll see when we go down to Tassie.
You were too good as a client. You were referring too much work to them. They had to get rid of it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That was it. That was it. It was all ours.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Let's say that. No,
No,
wrong one.
Forget that one.
Sorry.
I haven't got my glasses repaired. They are getting repaired, by the way.
sorry.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So everyone, let me say something here.
Seriously?
Look here. Here's a
Okay.
real one.
All right. So if it wasn't for this man, there would be no Craftworks. As I said, if there was no Voyager Craft Malts, there'd be no Craftworks. This man is the most inspirational man, and it's the reason Craftworks exists. In fact, when he worked at Brooklady, that was my first distillery that got me on my journey back in early 2000. I have a Brooklady shrine in my shed. So
It's actually a little bit creepy.
It is creepy. It's very
It
creepy.
is a bit creepy.
I was given the opportunity by the author of the biography to sell this book, and I was absolutely honored, and I went yes on the spot. So we have imported this book, and we have sole distribution rights in Australia and New Zealand. For any budding distiller, for any seasoned distiller, Tim and Rob, we highly recommend this book. We got a few. We got
one or two.
We got 250 on a pallet coming end of July, by the way.
Regardless of all that, it is a really, really good book. It's an easy read. It is very informative. And
if you know Jim McEwen, if you don't, this is the story of his life. Pictures. It's a heavy-duty book. It's 500 something pages. It's everything what happened in Brooklady, the rebirth of Brooklady.
It's the first book I've ever read. It's the first book I've ever read in a Scottish accent.
And yet a little bit of wee came out?
No, it's the first book I've ever read in a Scottish accent.
I thought a little bit of wee came out.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Anyway.
No, not the wee, but the Scottish accent.
We're doing it under Aussie Craft Distillers. And why? Because, and this is we come to
No.
Yes, we do.
No.
It's the charity.
No, it's not.
It's not a fucking charity.
We are going to
because you really appreciate buying the book. Trust me, you'll enjoy reading it. Oh, that's good.
Asshole. Turn it off.
No.
Fucking.
Buy the book. Jump on. Oh, did I unmute myself?
You did.
I did.
We want to go to the US next year.
Shit.
Oh, fuck.
Sweetnessfeast.com.au. You can buy it from there. It is money.
For
how much does it cost again?
140.
$140.
$140. Yeah, it's a worthwhile
bargain.
It's worthwhile.
Absolute bargain.
All right, and the last thing we needed to mention Ostra. Big night.
Go.
The website live.
Oh yeah, Ostra went live.
Yeah, Ostra Distillers, who we had on a couple of weeks ago.
Have the banner up there. Hold on.
So Ostra is the sleeping giant on the Australian distillers scene, but craft 100%. Very big, but very, very small. But Ostra Distillery or Distillers is now live and released their very first product. So
you can buy the product.
You buy the product.
You won't get it yet. It's in pre-order.
You talk about it.
So it is in pre-order. It's a very nice website, if I do say so myself.
Put the bottle up. Put the bottle up. Put the bottle up.
Jeez, now I can't. I can't.
Pressure.
It's going to take me too long to do.
Well, we can talk.
Jump on austradistillers.com. Beautiful bottles.
Beautiful product.
Starting from $90. Going all the way up to $625 for the inaugural release. Wow. But it'll be pretty damn good.
Can you just take a photo and click it across?
Geez.
Bear with us here.
Anyway, while that's happening.
Oh, fuck. What did I do?
Oh, shit. Now you're bigger. We don't need you.
Don't do that.
No, that's horrible.
You fix that while I do this.
Todd, Anyway, while we're doing that, I'd like to thank Tim and Rob. Guys, that was awesome.
Long-suffering guests.
It was a deep dive. It's a really good insight to what you guys are up to. And seriously, Aussie Craft Distillers Shooting the Shit is coming to Tassie maybe later in the year. I know I am, at least. Really want to catch up with you guys. And yeah, I want to get into the lab and I want to taste some of those special things that you're working on. That's super cool, guys. That really is cool.
Here
We would
is.
love to have you guys.
There you go. Look, there's the bottle. How cool is that? Hold on, I need to fix the banner. That's the Austria bottle, which is quite pretty. And that's wood around the outside of the bottle there.
Wow.
I don't know how they do that, but he's done it somehow. We did have a final question come through there.
Yep.
How do I go about getting a bottle of Waubs? You
Easy.
jump on the website.
That's
Easy.
the one.
WaubsHarbourWhiskey.com. Get on there. It is on the it's on the screen at the moment. I'll put it in the chat as well. So for those listening later on, you've got the link straight there.
I think we're done.
Fuck, I'll do that. I'm trying to click around too much, and
You're
I'm not.
from IT. You should handle this pressure. Jesus.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for having us
You
tonight.
seriously
Don't go. Hang for a sec, guys. Hang
Oh,
for a sec. We're about to wind it up. But
There we go. All right, so I've just put it in the chat. Everybody, please jump on, buy a bottle, sell them out, and everybody will be happy. It'll make their time tonight worth it.
and we're on next week with
next week is me,
Louis,
Nico,
mixed trade.
Nico and Nick Hope.
Nick Hope,
We will be talking to Louis
from
Mezcala Mextrade.
Mixed trade.
Mixed Trade. So
So we're going to be talking about mezcal and all things Mexican.
imported, very, very cool.
And he is the most passionate person that you've ever met.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
No, you were not
No.
there.
Oh, fuck, I'm out of here.
No, you weren't there.
Yeah, please do.
He's the most passionate person about mezcal that you will ever meet. And he's lovely.
I haven't met him, and I might tune in next week. Oh no, I might not. I'll be doing
Whatever.
I'm doing a Craftworks night, so yeah, no, maybe not. Anyway,
And
I will
You
watch
won't be anywhere near the place.
You can jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or Facebook to watch it after the fact.
Hey, tell the audience that we're. Go on, tell the audience. Go on, you're gonna love this. Love this. Love this. Love this.
We are in. We are in the top 60 spirits podcasts in the world,
According to,
according to a website that emailed me today.
we got no idea who they are.
So that means that we're 60.
No, we're 31.
We're 31.
We're 31.
We're not.
Oh, wow.
We're in the mid pack. We don't know who the
Apparently
fuck they are.
Apparently
We've got no
we
idea.
talk too much, and my wife has just shut the door. So
Yeah, but I looked at all the podcasts and I went, don't know it, don't know it, don't know it, don't know it, don't know it.
So we're in good company.
Very good company, yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
all for joining us. Please jump on to WaubsHarbourWhiskey.com. Jump on to shootingtheshit.com.au and buy a book. And
please buy a book.
please fucking buy a book.
Otherwise, we've got a pallet. We've got to
so
house somewhere.
many fucking books.
You guys are classic. Loved
I
it. No,
will-
thanks for having us, guys. It was a great night, and yeah, so much fun shooting the shit with fellow distillers out there. So yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for watching online, and I'll see you next Thursday.
Hang around, guys, for a sec.
Bye-bye.
Bye.